Hey everyone, if you're watching and still not subscribed, now is the time. Hit that button and join the creepy crew for more spooky stories. And to those who already subscribed, thank you for being part of this journey. Don't forget to like the video and leave a comment. I had been grinding away at my job in an international company for months, barely taking a break. When I finally saved up enough vacation days, I decided to get away from my routine. I'd read about these roadside diners and old highways on the outskirts of the city, and something about that vibe just felt right. I wasn't looking for anything fancy, just a change of scenery. I booked a room at a cheap motel, the kind where the walls are thin, and you can hear other guests talking through them. It wasn't great, but I wasn't planning on spending much time there anyway. That first evening, I wandered into a small bar a few blocks from the motel. The neon signs flickered, and the smell of grilled food hit me as soon as I stepped inside. It had this cozy, local feel, dim lighting, an old jukebox playing rock classics, a handful of regulars who probably came here every night. I grabbed a seat at the bar and ordered a drink. That's when I noticed her. She was leaning against the counter, laughing at something the bartender said. She had this effortless confidence, like she belonged there. At some point, our eyes met, and she gave me this easy, welcoming smile. It didn't take long for us to start talking. She asked where I was from, what brought me here, and we fell into a conversation about music, road trips, and how this town had its own way of coming alive after dark. It turned out she knew all the spots that weren't in any travel guide. Hidden diners, dive bars, and places only the locals knew about. I liked the way she talked about them, like they were secrets worth sharing. And then she leaned in a little closer, her voice playful but serious at the same time, and said, "You want to see the best party in town?" I hesitated for maybe half a second. This was exactly the kind of night I had been hoping for. Something spontaneous, something different. I nodded. We clicked fast. The conversation flowed like we'd known each other for years. She had this way of making everything seem easy, like nothing was ever a big deal. I hadn't felt that relaxed in a long time. She told me about all these places around town that you wouldn't find unless you knew someone who lived here. I liked that. I liked the idea of seeing the town from her perspective instead of as just another outsider passing through. At some point, she mentioned that her friends were throwing a party, not in a club, not in some bar, but at a house, way out where nobody will bother us. That's how she put it. I was already in a good mood, and honestly, I was up for anything. A house party with locals sounded way better than another night drinking alone at the motel. A few minutes later, a guy pulled up outside in an old beat-up pickup truck. I didn't recognize him, but she greeted him like an old friend. He barely looked at me before jerking his head toward the truck, like that was all the invitation I needed. She climbed into the passenger seat, and I slid into the back. We drove for a while, winding through dark, empty roads. The headlights barely cut through the night, and there weren't many streetlights out here. The stereo was cranked up loud, some bass-heavy track that made the whole truck vibrate. She was singing along, laughing, her head tilted back against the seat. The guy up front didn't say much, just tapped his fingers against the steering wheel in time with the music. At some point, we pulled into a small 24-hour convenience store. She turned in her seat, grinning at me. "We need drinks," she said, like it was obvious. The three of us got out and wandered inside. The place was nearly empty except for the cashier, an older guy who barely looked up from his newspaper. I grabbed a couple of beers from the fridge, and she picked out a random mix of snacks, chips, candy, a pack of gum she tossed at me with a wink. The guy driving the truck paid for everything without saying much. I didn't think too hard about it. The whole night had this easy flow to it, like I was just going along with whatever happened next. She was still joking around, still looking as relaxed as she had all night. That was enough to make me feel the same way. The party was already in full swing when we arrived. The music was loud, pounding through the walls of the house, and the place was packed with people. The air smelled like a mix of alcohol, cigarette smoke, and something else. Maybe weed. Maybe just the stale scent of too many people crammed into one space. I followed her inside, sticking close as we weaved through the crowd. People were laughing, shouting over the music, swaying to the beat in the dim lighting. I didn't recognize a single face, but nobody seemed to pay much attention to me. Everyone looked a little distant, like they were having fun but not really there. I figured that was just the way things were at parties like this. People drinking, getting high, letting go. She led me to a corner of the room where a few others were gathered. Someone handed me a drink, a plastic cup filled with something dark and slightly frothy. "Try this," she said, smiling. I hesitated for half a second before taking a sip. It was bitter, with a strange aftertaste I couldn't quite place. "Local mix," she added, watching me. I nodded, swallowing the last of it. It wasn't great, but I didn't want to seem weird about it. The warmth spread through my stomach, and I leaned back against the wall, letting myself relax into the energy of the room. That feeling didn't last long. A few minutes later, my head started spinning. The voices around me blurred. The lights seemed too bright, then too dim. I tried to focus on her, but her face looked strange, too far away, like I was seeing her through thick glass. My body felt heavy, like I was sinking into the floor. I tried to say something, tell her I wasn't feeling right, but my tongue wouldn't move properly. The words came out slurred, too soft to hear over the music. She leaned in closer. I saw her lips move, but the words didn't register. My vision tunneled, darkening at the edges, and then nothing. I woke up to the cold bite of early morning air. My body ached, my head pounding like a hammer was driving nails into my skull. My throat was dry, my mouth coated in a bitter metallic taste. I was lying on the ground, dirt, small rocks pressing into my skin. I blinked, trying to clear my vision, and slowly sat up. I was in the backyard of some rundown house. The grass was overgrown, littered with empty bottles and cigarette butts. The back door hung slightly open, swaying with the breeze, but the house itself was silent. My heart started to race. I patted my pockets. Nothing. My wallet, gone. My phone, gone. Even my watch was missing. My jacket was still on me, but it wasn't mine. It was old, slightly too big, and smelled like stale sweat. I looked down and realized my clothes weren't mine either. They were familiar, though. Something I had bought before this trip. Something cheap I had barely worn. I stood up too fast, my legs shaky beneath me. I had no idea how long I'd been out or where I even was. Beyond the yard, a narrow dirt road stretched toward the horizon. No houses, no people, just the occasional car passing in the distance. I forced myself to move. I walked for what felt like miles, barefoot, my body still sluggish. Every step sent a dull ache through my skull, but I couldn't stop. I needed to find someone, get help, figure out what the hell had happened. Eventually, I reached a gas station. It looked small and old, like it had been sitting there untouched for decades. I stepped inside, and the guy behind the counter looked up, his eyes narrowing immediately. I must have looked rough, dirty, out of place, maybe even suspicious. "Help me," I managed to say, my voice hoarse. "I need help." The guy didn't say anything right away, just looked me up and down, like he was trying to decide if I was trouble or not. Then he sighed, reached for something behind the counter, and slid a bottle of water toward me. I grabbed it, my hands shaking as I twisted the cap off and drank. When I told him I needed to call the police, he frowned. "You got any ID?" I shook my head. "No name? No phone? Nothing?" "Nothing." He exhaled through his nose, then nodded toward an old landline on the wall. "You can try, but without any real info, I don't know how much they'll do." I dialed, my fingers clumsy. When the operator picked up, I explained everything. At least, everything I could remember. The response was exactly what I feared. Without names, without a location, without proof, there wasn't much they could do. They asked if I was injured. I said no. They asked if I could describe the people I was with. I tried, but the details were slipping away, blending together. They told me to come to the station if I could. That was it. I hung up. The guy behind the counter watched me. They ain't gonna help, are they? I didn't answer. I was stranded. No money. No ID. No way to get home. I ended up borrowing a few bucks from a guy I barely knew, an old coworker who wired me just enough for a bus ticket out. It was humiliating, but I had no other option. As I sat at the station, waiting for my ride out of that place, I kept replaying everything in my head. How easy it had been. How I had trusted her. How I had walked right into it without a second thought. I wasn't even angry, just tired. I made it home, but something about that trip stuck with me. Now, whenever someone I barely know invites me somewhere, I hesitate. Whenever a stranger smiles a little too easily, I wonder. And I never, ever take drinks from someone I just met. I signed up for a new dating app out of boredom, just looking to meet new people. Her profile seemed friendly enough. Normal pictures, nothing overly polished or suspicious. We started chatting about movies and food, just casual stuff. She wasn't overly flirty or weird, which made me more comfortable. After a couple of days, she suggested meeting up in a small cafe near a busy highway. It wasn't too far, and the place had plenty of people around, so it felt like a safe choice. I agreed, figuring it would be a simple meetup. Just coffee, nothing serious. Still, as the evening approached, I found myself feeling a little nervous. It wasn't my first time meeting someone from an app, but you never know how things will go. She was a few minutes late. I was sitting near the window, watching the parking lot outside, and for a second, I thought she wouldn't show. But then she walked in, her eyes darting around the room like she was checking for someone. She had a rushed, almost anxious energy. When she spotted me and made her way over, she forced a quick smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. As she sat down, I noticed her hands were a little unsteady when she picked up the menu. She barely looked at me, just glancing down at the table like she was distracted. At first, I assumed it was just nerves. First dates can be awkward. I tried to start a conversation about music, hoping to lighten the mood. She responded, but her answers were short, almost mechanical, like she wasn't really present. Every now and then, she'd steal a glance toward the entrance, like she was expecting someone to walk in. That was when I started to feel a little off about the whole thing. It wasn't just nerves. She seemed genuinely on edge, like she was waiting for something to happen. For a moment, I considered asking her outright if everything was okay, but I didn't want to make it weirder than it already was. Maybe she was worried about running into someone she knew. I pushed through the awkwardness, trying to keep the conversation going. Eventually, we ordered coffee and sandwiches. I thought maybe once the food arrived, she'd relax a little. A few minutes later, she suddenly asked me to look at something on her phone. Her voice was low, almost hesitant, as she slid it across the table. I frowned, confused, but picked it up. She had a message open. just a short fragment of a longer conversation. The words didn't make sense at first, but as I read them, my stomach tightened. It was a threat, direct and explicit. Someone was telling her they were watching, that she shouldn't have come here. I wanted to ask her what was going on, but before I could say a word, a tall, furious man stormed toward our table. His voice cut through the cafe like a knife. "That's my wife!" he shouted. "You think you can mess with my family?" I froze. My brain struggled to process what was happening. I stood up instinctively, hands slightly raised, trying to show I wasn't a threat. But I didn't even get the chance to explain. She shot up from her chair too, trying to say something, but he shoved her aside without hesitation. She stumbled, knocking over her coffee, the cup shattering on the floor. Everything in the cafe changed in an instant. Conversation stopped. A few waiters froze mid-step, their trays wobbling in their hands. Some customers started reaching for their phones, probably to call for help. But no one moved to intervene yet. The man turned his full attention back to me, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His breathing was heavy, furious, like he had been waiting for this moment. I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my ears. He didn't care that we were in public. He didn't care that there were witnesses. This wasn't just an argument. This was about to turn into something much worse. I tried to explain. "We just met through an app," I said quickly. "I didn't know she was married." He didn't even acknowledge my words. His face twisted in rage, and he pointed a shaking finger at me. "You think that makes it okay?" His voice rose. "You're ruining my marriage." The girl, still shaken, yelled back, "I filed for divorce." That only made things worse. His anger flared into something uncontrollable. I took a step back, glancing around, hoping someone, anyone, would step in. A few waiters hesitated, looking between each other, but no one moved. Then he lunged. His fist slammed into my side, just below my ribs. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. My legs buckled. I collapsed onto the floor, barely able to register what just happened. A sickening crack echoed in my ears. My vision blurred for a second. The pain shot through my lower back, sharp and unnatural. People screamed. Someone knocked over a chair. A few voices shouted for help. But the man was still standing over me, his chest heaving with rage. He cursed, yelling something I couldn't fully process. Some of the cafe staff finally reacted. One of the waiters tried to grab him, while another stepped between us. A few customers rushed to help the girl, who was sobbing, holding her arm where she had fallen. I couldn't move. My body wasn't responding the way it should. The last thing I remember before everything blurred together was the sound of sirens in the distance. They took me away in an ambulance, the paramedics speaking in urgent voices. The pain in my back was unbearable, radiating through my whole body. My hands felt numb. I kept trying to move my legs, but nothing happened. Hours later, in the hospital, the doctor gave me the news. Spinal cord injury. Permanent damage. I wouldn't walk the same way again. Maybe never. All because of a date I knew nothing about. She visited me once. She told me she had hoped her husband wouldn't find out about our meeting, that she thought it was safe. I reported everything to the police. They started looking for him, but he disappeared. No arrests, no closure. My life isn't the same anymore. I lost my job. I'm still in rehab, trying to regain whatever movement I can. And I haven't opened a dating app since. I was about 20 years old, studying design at university, when a stranger messaged me on social media. He introduced himself as an aspiring photographer looking for models to build his portfolio. He claimed his work had been published in amateur magazines and that he had a cozy studio in a quiet neighborhood with small houses. We exchanged messages for weeks, and he kept sending me examples of his photos. They looked decent, nothing suspicious or unprofessional. When he finally invited me to meet in person to discuss the details, I agreed, thinking it was a great chance to get some professional pictures for free. I treated it like a first date with a creative person. The idea of being photographed by someone passionate about their work felt exciting. I picked out a couple of outfits, something stylish but not too flashy. That morning, I felt a little nervous, but told myself it was normal. Meeting new people always made me a little anxious, but there was no reason to think anything would go wrong. It was just a simple photo session. We met outside a small building he called his mini studio. It was an ordinary office block, tucked away on the outskirts of the city where few people walked by. The kind of place you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it. From the outside, it didn't look like much. Just a gray, nondescript building with a faded sign above the door. Inside, it was dimly lit, and the air smelled of old paper and something else I couldn't quite place. He led me down a short hallway to a room that looked like a makeshift studio. A few softbox lights were set up around a small, slightly raised platform, which I assumed was for posing. Cables snaked across the floor, and an old wooden table in the corner was cluttered with equipment, notebooks, and scattered photographs. I glanced at the pictures. They were of different women, but something about them felt off. The poses were unnatural, stiff, like the models had been caught mid-movement. Some of them had blurred expressions, as if they hadn't known the picture was being taken. "Who are they?" I asked, pointing at the photos. "My past models," he said quickly, sweeping them into a drawer before I could look any closer. There was something odd about the way he did it, too rushed, as if he didn't want me to see them. A cold feeling crept up my spine, but I pushed it down. I reminded myself that artists could be eccentric. Maybe he was just sensitive about his work. He kept talking about creative freedom, how important it was to capture a person's true essence, and complimented my unique style. At first, we took a few simple shots. He showed me the pictures on his camera screen, and they looked nice. Nothing unusual. I started to relax, thinking maybe I had been overreacting. Then he suggested we change the setting. He said there was better lighting in the back room. I followed him, expecting another part of the studio, maybe a different backdrop or some props. Instead, I stepped into a dusty, windowless room covered in black fabric. The air felt heavy, stale. The only light came from a single dim bulb overhead. He said he used this space for a total isolation effect, claiming it helped create the most expressive shots. The way he spoke about it, like it was some deep artistic philosophy, made me uneasy. But I didn't want to seem naive or inexperienced. Then he asked me to pose differently, more provocative. He told me to remove part of my clothing. His tone was still friendly, but there was something firm underneath, an expectation. I hesitated. I'm not comfortable with that. His expression changed instantly. The easygoing, artistic guy from before was gone. His jaw tightened, and his voice turned cold. "You're too stiff," he muttered. "If you want good photos, you have to let go. Otherwise, what's the point of wasting my time?" I froze, unsure how to respond. Something in his tone, in the way he looked at me now, made my skin crawl. I suddenly felt trapped. I told him I wanted to end the shoot. He didn't take it well. His face darkened, and he let out a frustrated sigh. "Do you have any idea how much time I've spent setting this up? The equipment, the studio rental? You can't just walk out. You owe me for this." His voice was low, controlled, but there was anger simmering underneath. The air in the room felt tighter. My pulse sped up. I knew I had to leave. Now. I turned toward the door. He moved fast, stepping in front of me, blocking the exit. His stance was wide, his arms slightly outstretched, not touching me, but making it clear I wasn't getting past him easily. His expression had changed completely. No more smiles, no more easy charm. His eyes were sharp, calculating. "You agreed to this," he said. "You can't back out now. We're finishing the project." For a split second, I panicked. He was taller, stronger. If he decided to stop me, I didn't think I could push past him. Then instinct kicked in. I opened my mouth and screamed. Loud. As loud as I could. His whole body jerked, like he hadn't expected it. I screamed again, even louder, hoping, praying, that someone, anyone, might hear. His eyes flickered toward the hallway, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty on his face. He took a half step back. That was all I needed. I shoved past him, my shoulder knocking into his arm, and sprinted out of the room. I didn't stop. I ran through the hallway, barely registering the layout of the building, just looking for the exit. My bag was still near the entrance. I grabbed it without slowing down, yanking open the door and bursting outside. Only when I reached the street did I realize how hard I was shaking. My legs felt unsteady. My heart pounded so fast it was hard to breathe. I kept walking, putting as much distance as possible between me and that place. The next day, I posted about what happened in my university student forum. I wanted to warn other people. The responses came quickly. I wasn't the first. Other girls had been through the same thing, some even worse. They had stayed silent, afraid no one would believe them. Or worse, that people would blame them for agreeing to the shoot in the first place. Reading their messages made my stomach turn. This wasn't just an uncomfortable encounter. It was a pattern, a trap. I learned a hard lesson that day. It's terrifying how easy it is to fall into a situation like this. How something that seems harmless, even professional, can turn dangerous in an instant. Now I'm more careful. I never meet strangers in isolated places. I always bring someone with me, and I trust my instincts, because the moment something feels wrong, it probably is. We met on a popular website, and she seemed really friendly and fun. Her pictures showed her in a spacious house with a big backyard, overlooking a green lawn. She told me her relatives were out for the weekend and invited me over so we could get to know each other better. It didn't seem suspicious to me. She had an open smile and a casual way of writing that made her feel trustworthy. That evening, I drove my old car over and parked near a low fence, taking a moment to look around. The neighborhood was quiet, with similar large houses lined up in neat rows. It looked like the kind of place where families lived, where people walked their dogs in the mornings and waved to each other from their porches. She met me at the door, smiling, and invited me in for dinner. The moment I stepped inside, I noticed how warm and well-kept the house was. Soft lighting, neatly arranged furniture, a faint smell of something freshly baked still lingering in the air. It felt normal, safe. Dinner was easy, filled with talk about music and movies. She had a way of laughing that made everything feel comfortable. After eating, we decided to watch a comedy. The living room was spacious, with a big couch facing a large TV, and we stretched out on it as the movie played. The hours slipped by, and at some point, we both dozed off on the couch, the flickering light from the screen still casting shadows across the room. It was late, well past midnight, and I remember feeling strangely at ease despite it being our first time meeting in person. The warmth of the house, the quiet of the night outside, the distant hum of the television, It all felt so normal. A loud noise snapped me awake. It was the front door slamming open, not like someone carefully unlocking it, but like it was shoved with force. My body tensed immediately. A deep, rough male voice echoed through the house, sharp and aggressive. Someone had just walked in uninvited. She bolted upright, eyes wide with fear. Her breath came fast and uneven. Then, in a hushed, urgent whisper, she said, "It's my ex. We just broke up." My pulse pounded in my ears. I hadn't even known she had a boyfriend before, let alone an ex who would barge in like this. I asked her what we should do, but she just bit her lip, realizing things were about to get out of control. Her ex stormed into the living room. His eyes immediately landed on the unfamiliar sneakers near the door, then on me. His face twisted with anger, and he demanded an explanation. His voice was sharp, accusing, as if my presence in the house was some kind of crime. She tried to talk to him calmly, telling him to leave, but he wasn't listening. He kept yelling that he wouldn't allow some random guy in her house. His hands were clenched into fists, his whole body tense like he was ready to explode. I tried to de-escalate, raising my hands and saying there was no need for trouble, but before I could even finish, he shoved me. It wasn't a full-force attack, more like a warning, but the aggression in his eyes told me he was just getting started. He looked ready to trash everything in sight. For a second, I thought about calling the police, but something about his expression made me hesitate. He wasn't just angry, he was unpredictable. The wrong move could push him over the edge. She looked completely lost, glancing between us like she wasn't sure how to stop this from spiraling further. I could feel the situation getting more volatile with every second. I knew there was no reasoning with him. If I stayed any longer, it would turn into a fight. I needed to get out before it got worse. She grabbed my arm and whispered for me to go upstairs and wait in the bedroom while she tried to calm him down. It didn't seem like the best plan, but it was better than standing in the middle of his rage. I nodded and quickly made my way up the stairs, shutting the door behind me. But the second I was out of sight, his voice got even louder. He was yelling at her now, his words fast and aggressive. I couldn't make out everything, but I caught bits and pieces. Accusations, demands, something about betrayal. I realized I couldn't just sit there. He might start looking for me, and I wasn't about to be cornered in some bedroom. Then I saw it. The window. It was slightly open, leading directly onto the garage roof. It wasn't high, maybe a short drop to the ground. I made a split-second decision. I slid the window open fully and carefully climbed out, trying not to make a sound. My heart was hammering as I lowered myself onto the roof, feeling the rough shingles beneath my hands. I crouched and moved slowly toward the edge. The backyard was empty, but I didn't have time to hesitate. Taking a deep breath, I slid down the sloped roof and dropped into a flower bed below. The landing wasn't graceful, but at least it was soft. I groaned, pushing myself up, brushing dirt off my hands. I glanced back at the house. The yelling hadn't stopped. He was still inside, arguing with her. This was my chance. Keeping my head down, I moved quickly, circling the house until I reached the front. My car was right where I left it. I yanked the door open, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine. As I pulled away, I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting him to come running out after me, but no one followed. Later that night, she texted me. She said he broke a couple of plates and trashed some furniture, but he didn't hurt her. Then she admitted something that made my stomach sink. She had invited me over on purpose, to make him jealous, to push him into fully ending things. I just sat there, staring at my phone, realizing I had been dragged into something I never agreed to. I had risked my own safety over a relationship mess I didn't even know existed. That night, I made a decision. No more blind trust. No more believing everything people say online without knowing who they really are. This was supposed to be a normal first date. Instead, it turned into one of the worst experiences of my life. I learned the hard way that sometimes, behind friendly messages and nice pictures, there are hidden conflicts waiting to pull you into something dangerous. I wanted to start dating again after a long break, and some friends recommended a dating app. That's how I met a guy who seemed incredibly polite and charming. He suggested meeting at a cozy little restaurant known for its traditional homemade dishes and pleasant music. On the day of the date, I was a little nervous, but his manners and light humor quickly put me at ease. The restaurant was warm and inviting. Families and elderly couples sat at nearby tables, chatting over their meals. From the open kitchen, the clatter of dishes and soft laughter of the staff added to the atmosphere. We ordered food and made small talk about everyday things: work, hobbies, travel. He told funny stories about his college days and how he loved tinkering with his old car. He spoke in a relaxed, easygoing way, and I found myself smiling, thinking maybe, just maybe, I had finally met someone decent. Before the main course arrived, he suggested we toast and ordered a couple of drinks. I wasn't suspicious at all. While waiting for them, I glanced at my phone and saw a missed call from my friend. I got distracted for a moment, scrolling through messages, and when I looked back up, my drink was in front of me, but something felt off. The glass looked slightly different, like it had been moved or turned. It was such a small detail, but it made me hesitate. I glanced at him, but he was just sitting there, smiling, relaxed, as if nothing had happened. I didn't want to seem rude or distrustful, so I said nothing. We clinked glasses, drank, and continued eating. The conversation moved on to our interests. He talked as if we had known each other for years, and in a way, it was flattering. A small doubt flickered somewhere deep inside me, but I brushed it away. I told myself I was just being paranoid. By the end of dinner, I started feeling an unusual weakness in my legs. My heartbeat quickened. I tried to take slow, deep breaths, hoping it was just nerves or fatigue, but the feeling only got worse. My head felt heavy, my arms sluggish. A creeping dizziness made it hard to focus. He noticed. His expression shifted slightly just for a second before he leaned forward with concern. "You okay?" he asked. His voice was calm, steady. I nodded, forcing a weak smile, not wanting to seem dramatic. But when I tried to stand, my knees nearly buckled. The restaurant around me blurred for a moment. He caught my arm, steadying me. "Let me help you get a taxi," he said. I had no choice. Walking out of there alone wasn't an option. I could barely stay on my feet. I nodded, gripping his arm for support as we made our way outside. My legs felt like they weren't my own, and my vision wavered, like I was slipping into a dream. The cold night air didn't clear my head. It only made me realize how bad this was. And then, suddenly, he stopped. We were just outside the restaurant, near the curb. He let go of my arm, reached into his pocket, and pulled out some cash. "Sorry," he said casually. "I have to run. Urgent thing came up." I barely processed what was happening before he pressed the bills into my hand and turned away, walking off without hesitation. I stood there, swaying slightly, gripping the money in numb fingers. The streetlights buzzed overhead. I don't know how long I stood like that, but eventually, I stumbled forward and managed to wave down a taxi. The driver took one look at me, my pale face, the way I was slurring my words, and hesitated before unlocking the doors. "You all right?" he asked as I fell into the seat. I tried to respond, but my tongue felt thick, and forming words was getting harder. The last thing I remember before blacking out was the driver muttering, "Jesus Christ," and speeding toward the hospital. At the hospital, the doctors ran tests and found an unknown substance in my system, something that attacked the nervous system. They said I was lucky. I hadn't finished my drink, which probably saved me. If I had drunk more, I might not have woken up. I didn't need anyone to tell me how it got in my system. I already knew. The more I replayed that night in my mind, the clearer it became. He had planned everything. The charm, the perfect setting, the easy conversation. The moment I looked away from my drink, I told the police everything. I described him, his voice, his mannerisms. But I had almost nothing concrete. Just a profile on a dating app, which was already deleted by the time they checked. No phone number. No last name. Nothing. Without solid evidence, the case went nowhere. I spent weeks recovering in the hospital, then another month barely functioning at home. The effects of the poisoning lingered. My body was weak. My mind felt disconnected. Sleep was filled with hazy, feverish dreams of that night. His smile, the drink, the moment my body stopped feeling like mine. When I finally got back to some version of normal, the doctors told me there were lasting effects. My vision was worse than before. I had persistent headaches and strange nerve pain that would come and go. They couldn't say if it would ever fully heal. I blamed myself for ignoring the small red flags, for drinking that toast, for not trusting my gut when I noticed my glass had been moved. But who thinks about these things on a first date? Who prepares for something like this? I started seeing a neurologist and undergoing therapy, trying to regain control over my body and mind. My friends were supportive, but no matter how much they reassured me, the fear remained. And every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, his relaxed expression, his steady voice. Somewhere, he was still out there. And I had no doubt he was already looking for someone new. He seemed shy but harmless when we met at a friend's party. Quiet, a little awkward, but polite. There was something about his reserved nature that I found intriguing. After the party, we started messaging back and forth. Nothing too deep, mostly jokes, random thoughts, and the occasional conversation about movies or books. He wasn't overly talkative, but he always responded quickly, and there was a certain charm in the way he typed. A couple of weeks into our chats, he invited me over for dinner. Said he loved cooking and wanted to make something special. It caught me off guard, but I figured, why not? He had been nice so far, and I liked the idea of a home-cooked meal instead of another coffee shop meetup. Besides, it felt more personal, a good way to get to know him better. His place was in an older apartment complex, one of those buildings with narrow hallways, dim lighting, and creaky staircases. The kind that smelled like dust and something vaguely metallic. As I walked up, I felt a slight unease, but I brushed it off as first date nerves. He was already waiting at the door when I got there, smiling, relaxed, like he had been looking forward to this just as much as I had. The way he welcomed me in felt oddly familiar, as if we were old friends rather than two people still figuring each other out. Inside, his apartment was small but tidy. A kitchenette connected to the living room, which had a worn-out couch and a low coffee table cluttered with a few books and a laptop. Down a short hallway, I could see the edge of a bedroom door. The place smelled of something savory, cooked vegetables, maybe some kind of stew. On the dining table, 2 plates were already set, complete with candles flickering in their holders. We started talking easily. Movies, childhood memories, random stories from past jobs. There wasn't any awkwardness, just a natural flow of conversation. Every now and then, he would step away to check on the food, and I'd glance around, taking in the little details of his space. When dinner was nearly ready, I offered to help set the table. He hesitated for a second before nodding, but then, as I moved toward the hallway to grab extra plates, he quickly stopped me. "Not that room," he said, almost too fast. "It's a mess. Creative chaos." I raised an eyebrow but didn't press. People have their private spaces, and if he didn't want me in there, that was fine. I turned back and grabbed the dishes from the open shelf instead. We sat down to eat, and he watched me closely as I took my first bite. "How is it?" His voice had an intensity to it, like my opinion really mattered. The food was fine. A little too salty, but not bad. I smiled and told him it was good. His face lit up with satisfaction, like I had given him the exact answer he had been hoping for. After dinner, he stood up suddenly, his expression shifting into something almost excited. "I want to show you something special," he said. "Something personal." I immediately thought of the room he had told me not to enter. He must have noticed my hesitation because he gave a small smile and added, "Since we're starting to trust each other, I'll make an exception." I didn't know how to respond. There was something about the way he said it, calm but firm, that made it clear he expected me to follow. So I did. We walked down the narrow hallway, past the dimly lit bathroom and the slightly ajar bedroom door, until we reached the closed door at the end. He pushed it open, flipping on a light. The room was filled with shelves. Stacks of boxes lined the walls, some sealed, some open, revealing plastic limbs, bits of fabric, and tools. But what made me freeze were the dolls. Everywhere. They looked like newborn babies, but disturbingly lifelike. Their skin had faint veins, tiny wrinkles on their fingers, and the soft sheen of moisture in their glassy eyes. Some had tiny birthmarks, little scratches, even smudges of what looked like dried tears on their cheeks. He watched me closely, waiting for my reaction, and then, with a strange kind of pride, he said, "I make them myself. This is my life's work." I had no words. He walked further into the room, reaching for one of the dolls, holding it gently in both hands like an actual infant. "They're not just dolls," he continued. "They have names, stories. Every single one is unique." My stomach tightened. Up close, the details were even more unsettling. The eyelashes were individually placed, the skin had subtle discolorations mimicking real baby fat, and the hands, the way they curled, as if mid-movement, was almost too real. I forced myself to nod. "That's impressive." If he noticed my discomfort, he didn't show it. He kept talking, going on about how much time he spent perfecting each one. He described how he worked late into the night, sculpting tiny wrinkles, painting each layer of skin tone with careful precision, making sure they had just the right amount of life in them. "I give them histories," he said. "It makes them special. Some were born early, some had difficult childhoods, some were loved, some were abandoned." My hands felt clammy. The way he spoke, it wasn't just craftsmanship to him. It was something else. I tried to keep my voice steady. "You must sell a lot of them." He blinked, as if the thought hadn't even crossed his mind. "Oh no, I could never sell them." I swallowed. "They're my perfect friends," he added softly. The way he looked at them, the warmth in his expression, the careful way he ran a finger along one doll's cheek, made my breath hitch. He wasn't just an artist. He was attached. Deeply. I had to leave. I pulled out my phone, pretending to check a message. "My friend just texted. I said quickly. She needs me to come over. It's an emergency. His face fell, like a child being told they couldn't stay up late. Already? I forced a smile. Yeah, I'm really sorry. But I had a great time. He hesitated, then nodded. You'll come back, right? I'd love for you to get to know my family better. I didn't ask if he meant his actual family or the dolls. I grabbed my bag and moved toward the door, avoiding looking at the shelves as I passed. Even without turning, I could feel them, their wide, frozen eyes. As soon as I stepped into the hallway and heard the door close behind me, I exhaled, my shoulders dropping. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking. Later that night, lying in bed, I replayed the evening over and over. The food, the casual conversation, the way his whole demeanor changed when he talked about them, the way he called them his perfect friends. Maybe he was just lonely. Maybe it was just a hobby. But something about it felt wrong. I decided I wouldn't see him again. Because behind all that quiet politeness, there was something else. Something I didn't want to understand. I met a girl on a forum where we discussed music and poetry. She wrote short verses and often asked for advice on song recommendations. She seemed modest, maybe even a little naive, and I was just looking for some simple human connection. When she agreed to meet for coffee in a small town away from the noise of major roads, I was genuinely happy. It was a cozy place with large windows facing the parking lot, where colorful sedans and SUVs were neatly lined up. She arrived on time. As soon as she sat down, she started talking about books we had discussed online. She laughed at my jokes, nodded at my opinions, and the conversation flowed easily. There was something pleasant in her presence, soft, calm. I started imagining that maybe this could turn into something more than just a casual meeting. But then I noticed something. Every few minutes, she would glance toward the door, her eyes flicking away from me mid-sentence. It wasn't just a quick look, but the kind of anxious checking you do when you expect someone to walk in at any moment. It was subtle enough that I didn't pay much attention at first. I figured she was just shy or a little nervous. First meetings could be awkward, after all. The cafe was small, maybe 7 or 8 tables. A few people sat with laptops. A couple at the counter whispered quietly over their drinks. A waitress moved between the tables with a tray of steaming mugs. Everything felt normal. But as we talked, I started noticing the way her hands fidgeted. She smoothed out the napkin, then refolded it. She adjusted the strap of her bag over and over. When someone walked past our table, she tensed slightly, her smile faltering for just a second. I told myself I was overthinking. She was just being cautious, right? Maybe she wasn't used to meeting people from the internet. I pushed the thought away and kept the conversation going, pretending not to notice the way her eyes darted to the door again. We ordered cappuccinos and pastries. I tried steering the conversation toward personal topics, asked about her family, but she immediately changed the subject, asking about my hobbies instead. It wasn't rude, just a quick, smooth redirection. I let it go, not wanting to push. Sitting by the window, I had a clear view of the street outside. The sun had started dipping lower, casting long shadows over the sidewalk. Every now and then, a car would slow down near the cafe, pause for a few seconds, and then drive away. No one got out. I didn't think much of it at first, but after the 3rd or 4th time, it started to seem odd. She kept glancing at her phone, not just checking the time, but actively texting someone, her fingers moving quickly before she'd lock the screen and place it face down. It wasn't constant, just every few minutes. I didn't ask about it. Maybe she was checking in with a friend, letting them know she was safe. That would make sense. But something about her expression didn't sit right with me. She wasn't just distracted. She looked unsettled, like she was waiting for something, or someone, and she wasn't sure she wanted them to show up. Outside, another car slowed down near the curb. It lingered for a moment before rolling forward and disappearing around the corner. She put her phone down and forced a smile. Suddenly, the door swung open, and a man walked in with a tense, irritated look. He was older than us, mid-40s maybe, with a heavy build and an aggressive stance. His eyes locked onto our table immediately, and without hesitation, he strode over and slammed his palm onto the wooden surface. "You mind telling me what the hell you're doing with my little sister?" he barked, his voice loud enough to make the entire cafe fall silent. I froze. My brain struggled to process what was happening. The girl didn't look up. Instead, she shrank into her chair, bringing her hands up to cover her face. The man turned his attention back to me. "How old do you think she is?" I stared at him, my mouth opening and closing uselessly. She had looked completely normal, early 20s if I had to guess, and her profile had said the same. He didn't wait for an answer. His face twisted with disgust. "She's 16, you sick bastard." My stomach dropped. A few people in the cafe shifted uncomfortably. The barista behind the counter had stopped mid-pour, staring at us. "That's not..." I tried to speak, but my throat was too dry. He leaned in closer, jabbing a finger toward my chest. "How could you? Meeting up with a minor like this?" His voice was thick with rage. The girl let out a choked sob, her shoulders trembling. I felt everything around me closing in. I had done nothing wrong, I was sure of it. But in that moment, it didn't matter. The weight of everyone's eyes was crushing, the doubt in their faces, the judgment. The man exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You better pray the cops don't get involved." He glared at me, waiting for a reaction. I had no idea what to do. The man's accusations didn't stop. His voice grew louder, sharper, as he listed off all the terrible things that would happen if the police got involved. The charges. The consequences. He threw words at me that made my head spin. Things that could ruin my life if they stuck. Then his tone shifted. "I don't want to ruin your life, man," he sighed, his voice dripping with forced sympathy. "But you need to take responsibility." My brain latched onto the change, trying desperately to keep up. "What do you mean?" He crossed his arms. "I'm saying, we can handle this quietly. No cops, no reports. Just compensation for what you've put my sister through." A cold realization started creeping up my spine. Money. That's what this was about. I looked at the girl. She wasn't crying anymore. She had buried her face in her hands, but there were no real sobs, just quiet, uneven breaths. A performance. "You expect me to pay you?" My voice came out more steady than I felt. He scoffed. "Call it an apology. For the stress. For the damage you've done." I glanced around. The other customers were still watching, but no one wanted to get involved. To them, I already looked guilty. The girl whimpered softly. "Please, just listen to him," she whispered, her voice fragile. "I don't want this to get worse." My head was spinning. I didn't know what to do. If this was real, if I had genuinely been tricked, then I was already in deep. If I called his bluff and refused, would he actually get the police involved? Even if I was innocent, the situation alone could be enough to ruin me. I reached for my wallet, my fingers shaking. Then something in my brain clicked. It was too smooth, too rehearsed. The way she had changed the subject earlier. The way she had kept glancing at her phone, the cars stopping outside. This wasn't just an overprotective brother catching his sister on a date. This was planned. The second I handed over money, they'd have what they needed. Evidence that I was guilty of something. No. I pushed back my chair. I'm leaving. The man's face darkened instantly. The hell you are. I turned toward the door, but he reached for my arm. The second his fingers brushed my sleeve, my body reacted before I could think. I yanked myself free and bolted. Chairs scraped against the floor as I stumbled past the tables, knocking over someone's half-empty coffee cup. The barista shouted something, but I didn't stop. The moment I hit the door, I shoved it open with both hands and ran. I heard the man curse behind me, then heavy footsteps pounding against the floor. Outside, the sun had nearly set, and the street was bathed in dim orange light. I ran blindly, ducking between parked cars, my breath ragged. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. I risked a glance back. The man had stepped out of the cafe, scanning the street. But he wasn't running anymore. He was watching. I ducked behind a corner, pressing myself against the cold brick wall of a nearby building. I forced myself to stay still, to breathe quietly. After a few seconds, I heard a car door slam, then another. I peeked around the corner just in time to see a black sedan pull away from the curb. The girl was in the passenger seat. The man was driving. They were gone. I didn't move for a long time. Eventually, when I was sure they weren't coming back, I made my way to my car. My hands still shook as I fumbled with my keys. I slid into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and started the engine. I drove without looking back. It wasn't until I was miles away, safe in my own neighborhood, that my brain finally caught up with what had happened. It had all been a setup, the fake profile, the carefully chosen meeting spot. The brother who had appeared at just the right time. It was a scam, and I had almost fallen for it. I pulled over to the side of the road and just sat there, staring at the empty street. I had been lucky. If I had panicked more, if I had given them money, I might have been dragged into something much worse. I learned my lesson that night. Now, whenever I get invited to meet someone new, I double-check everything. I don't take chances. Because some mistakes don't just cost you money. They can cost you your entire life. I met him at a party hosted by some classmates, where everyone was talking about the latest music hits and sharing their weekend plans. He caught my attention with his confidence and the way he talked about his bike, a powerful, custom-built machine. The next day, we messaged each other, and he suggested a ride to get some adrenaline pumping and properly celebrate our first real meeting. I hesitated a little since I had never been on a motorcycle before, but curiosity and his charm won me over. He pulled up in my neighborhood, a quiet area with apartment buildings and neatly kept sidewalks. The bike's engine roared so loudly that people on the street turned to look. He handed me a helmet and told me confidently to hold on tight. That was my first big mistake because I had no idea what I was getting myself into. We took off, heading toward the highway. As we weaved between cars, the wind rushed past me so fast it almost felt like I couldn't breathe. At first, it was exhilarating, just the two of us against the world. He twisted the throttle, pushing the bike faster, showing off like he had no fear at all. I felt a mix of excitement and unease. The speed, the way he maneuvered between vehicles without hesitation, the fact that all I had for protection was the one helmet we shared. It all made my stomach tighten. At an intersection, he sped past several cars at once. I caught sight of drivers gesturing angrily, but he only laughed, saying he loved living at full speed. I shut my eyes as he twisted the throttle again, I wanted to believe he had everything under control, but my heartbeat was already sounding the alarm. After a while, he turned onto a country road where there were almost no oncoming cars. I could tell he was planning to go even faster, trying to impress me. The adrenaline was rushing through my veins, and at some point, it felt like we were flying over the asphalt. Then, suddenly, a deep pothole appeared ahead. He saw it too late. I felt a powerful jolt as the motorcycle lurched. My sense of direction vanished in an instant. We didn't have time to slow down. The next second, I was thrown sideways, the sound of metal scraping against the pavement filling my ears. Everything blurred, my vision spinning, my body weightless for just a moment before pain exploded in my leg. Then, impact. And then, nothing. I woke up in a hospital room, hooked up to machines, my whole body burning with pain. I could barely move. The doctors explained my injuries, serious damage all over, but the worst was my leg. The fracture had been so severe that they had to amputate it. It felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, listening to them speak as if they were talking about someone else. I couldn't believe this was happening to me. He had been injured too, but he had gotten off with a broken collarbone and some bruises. He visited me once. He looked upset, said he felt guilty. I didn't have the energy to yell or blame him. I was too overwhelmed by the reality that my life had just been shattered. My family and friends tried to comfort me, but I saw the tears in their eyes. The only thought running through my head was, why didn't I say no? Why did I get on that bike? Now, I'm going through a long rehabilitation, learning to walk again with a prosthetic leg. It feels like I lost a part of myself along with my limb. I still think about that day, about how I thought it would be exciting, maybe even romantic. He never came back. He sent a couple of messages saying he was sorry, but that was it. I don't know if he could have prevented the crash, but I do know I have to forgive myself for going with him in the first place. People offer sympathy, but no one can give me back what I lost. I try not to shut down completely because I know I have a long road ahead of me. This accident taught me to value my safety and never forget that overconfidence, whether mine or someone else's, can lead to irreversible consequences. I grew up in a family that loved camping and hiking, so the idea of inviting a girl on a mountain trail walk seemed perfect. We met in a sporting goods store while she was picking out running shoes. I mentioned knowing a scenic spot overlooking canyons, and she was immediately excited about the adventure. On the day of the hike, we left early, driving my old station wagon through rolling hills toward the trailhead. The weather was perfect, sunny, with a light breeze. Low mountains covered in trees and shrubs stretched around us. We started on the trail, chatting about random things, and it felt like the beginning of something good. She was full of energy, taking selfies at every scenic spot, smiling at the sunlight filtering through the trees. It was just a normal day, a simple hike. Nothing that could have warned us about how badly things would turn. The trail gradually led us higher, the drop-off getting closer to the narrow path. I walked ahead, ready to help if she needed a hand stepping over rocks or roots. She laughed, calling me her guide and bodyguard. After a while, we took a break near a rock ledge, drinking water and resting. The view was incredible. The canyon stretched below us, rugged and deep. I snapped a few pictures on my phone. She wanted the perfect photo at the edge of the cliff to impress her friends. I thought it was risky but didn't want to seem overly cautious, so I just told her to be careful. She seemed confident, adjusting her stance to find the best angle. I stepped aside, watching as she positioned herself, shifting slightly to get the most dramatic shot. Hearing her excited shout, I turned and saw her balancing right at the edge. She called me over, asking me to take a picture from a better angle with her phone. As I moved closer, I noticed the ground beneath her feet crumbling, My stomach tightened. I yelled for her to step back. But before she could react, the rocks beneath her shifted, and she started to lose her balance. In a split second, I lunged forward, grabbing her arm. My grip was tight, but I could feel her slipping. The loose dirt and small stones gave way under our weight. For a moment, we both teetered on the edge. Then, with terrifying suddenness, she fell, her body dragged down along with the cascading debris. I scrambled, my hands grasping at nothing, my mind racing. She was there 1 second and gone the next. A scream tore from my throat as I watched her disappear from sight. My breath caught in my chest, and for a few seconds, my whole body froze. It took me a minute to snap out of it, to force my legs to move. I had to find a way down. My hands were shaking as I searched for a path, my feet slipping over loose dirt. My heartbeat pounded so loudly it drowned out everything else. I half ran, half stumbled along the rocky slope, desperate to reach her. Every second felt like an eternity. When I finally made it to the bottom, I saw her lying on the rocks. She was conscious, moaning softly, her face twisted in pain. Relief hit me like a wave. She was alive. But as I got closer, I noticed something that sent a cold chill through my body. She wasn't moving her legs. I fell to my knees beside her. "You're okay, you're okay," I kept repeating, though I had no idea if that was true. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and called for help. My voice barely worked. The emergency operator asked for our location. My hands were sweaty, and I fumbled with the GPS. When they said they were sending a rescue team, I felt a small, fragile hope. I took off my jacket and carefully placed it over her, trying to keep her warm. "Stay with me," I said. "Just stay awake." She blinked slowly, her breathing shallow. I didn't know if she was going into shock, but I kept talking to her, asking her to focus, to hold on. Time felt distorted. The wait for help stretched unbearably long, though it couldn't have been more than half an hour. When the rescue team finally arrived, they moved quickly. A medic checked her vitals while another secured her to a stretcher. A helicopter hovered above, sending dust and debris flying as they prepared to airlift her out. One of the paramedics turned to me. "We don't have room for you on the chopper." I just nodded, barely processing the words. I stood there, helpless, as they lifted her into the air and took her away. My legs felt weak. The moment she disappeared into the sky, I sank down onto a rock, staring at the ground, feeling completely useless. Later, at the hospital, the doctors gave the news. Her spine was severely damaged. She had survived, but the fall had crushed something deep inside her body. She would never walk again. I visited her as often as I could. At first, she barely spoke. Sometimes, she cried silently, turning her face away. She never said she blamed me, but I could feel it, hanging between us like something heavy and unspoken. The hike was supposed to be a fun day, a shared adventure. Instead, it had stolen something from her that could never be replaced. Her family told me it wasn't my fault, that it was an accident. But I can't shake the guilt. I keep thinking about that moment, the second before she fell, when I could have said something stronger, done something more. I help her however I can. I support her financially, try to be there emotionally. But deep down, I know things will never be the same. No matter how much time passes, I can't stop replaying that day in my head. The sound of the rocks breaking, the way she slipped from my grip, the helplessness as she vanished over the edge. I wish I could go back, but I can't. I wasn't sure about going at first. My friends had been insisting for weeks that I needed to get out more, meet new people, and stop spending all my time buried in books or stuck in my own routine. They finally set me up with a guy they described as fun and easygoing, and before I could talk myself out of it, he invited me to a weekend gathering at a country house owned by one of his friends. I hesitated, but my friends kept pushing, telling me I should loosen up and just enjoy myself for once. When I arrived, the party was already in full swing. Laughter and music spilled out from the open windows, and the air smelled like grilled food and beer. A group of people, mostly guys in their early 20s, were gathered on the porch, passing around a bottle. They looked up as I approached, a few of them grinning at me in a way that made me self-conscious. But the guy I had come to meet stepped forward right away. He was friendly, his smile genuine, and he greeted me like we'd known each other for years. Inside, the house had the warm, slightly chaotic feel of a place where people had been drinking and laughing for hours. Empty snack bags and beer bottles cluttered the countertops, and the furniture looked well used, the kind of place where no one worried too much about spills or messes. A few people were sprawled on the couches, playing video games, while others talked loudly in the kitchen. I took a deep breath, trying to push past my nervousness. At least we weren't alone. Being in a group felt safer. He introduced me to his friends, and they were friendly enough, though a little loud and obviously tipsy. I got the sense that they all knew each other well, exchanging inside jokes and nudging each other when I wasn't looking. But I told myself I was overthinking things. They were just having fun. I forced myself to relax, reminding myself that this was supposed to be a good time. We sat together, talking over the noise. He told me about his travels, flipping through photos on his phone of hiking trips and road adventures. Some of the pictures were ridiculous, bad angles, goofy expressions, and we laughed at them together. Every now and then, one of his friends would wander over, dropping in on our conversation with teasing remarks. They'd glance at each other, smirking, like they were in on some joke I wasn't a part of. It felt a little off, but I brushed it aside. They were just messing around. The hours passed easily enough. We snacked on grilled food, listened to music, and the guys took turns playing video games in the next room. The atmosphere was casual, almost comfortable. The guy I came for seemed genuinely interested in talking to me, and for a while, I let my guard down. Maybe my friends were right. I did need to loosen up. It was late when someone suggested I should stay the night. The house was pretty far out, and they pointed out that I wasn't exactly an experienced driver, especially on dark country roads. It made sense. I didn't feel like getting behind the wheel so late, and everyone here seemed friendly enough. I told myself there was no harm in staying, but then something changed. As I got up to grab my phone charger from another room, I had no idea what was about to happen. While I was rummaging through my bag, I suddenly felt hands grab me from behind. My first instinct was to scream, but before I could make a sound, something was pulled over my eyes, blinding me. Laughter erupted around me. Several voices, all male, all way too loud. Someone shouted over the noise, "Relax, it's just a prank!" I twisted in their grip, trying to fight back, but they were stronger. My arms were pinned as they started dragging me somewhere. My feet scraped against the floor, my whole body stiff with panic. "Stop! Let me go!" I yelled, but my voice was swallowed by the music blasting from the speakers. Somewhere in the chaos, I heard a hesitant voice. "Hey, maybe this is too much?" It was someone in the group, sounding unsure. Another voice, sharper, dismissed him. "Chill, man. It's just a joke." I kept struggling, kicking out, trying to find something to grab onto. My breathing was rapid, my heart slamming in my chest. The guy I had come here for, his voice was there too, but it was distant, uncertain, like he wasn't sure what to do. I wanted him to stop this, to tell them to let me go, but he didn't. I was being pulled toward the stairs when I finally managed to jerk free from their grip, but it was too late. I lost my balance, blindfolded, unable to see where I was stepping. My foot missed the floor, and then I was falling. The world tilted. My body tumbled, hitting step after step, pain exploding with each impact. A sickening crack shot through my lower back as I hit the bottom, and then everything went still. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. My ears were ringing, my body frozen in shock. Someone shouted. The music cut off. Hands were suddenly on me, ripping away the blindfold. Faces loomed over me, their expressions wide-eyed, panicked. Someone kept saying my name over and over, but I couldn't focus. I tried to shift, but pain shot through me like a knife, making me gasp. "Oh my God," one of them whispered. "She's not moving," another voice said, horrified. The guy I had come here for was kneeling next to me, his face drained of color. He looked completely lost, like he couldn't process what had just happened. The others were still speaking, voices overlapping, throwing out apologies, but none of it mattered. I just wanted this nightmare to end. Someone called an ambulance. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my breath shallow, my whole body shaking. I knew something was very, very wrong. In the hospital, the truth hit like a second blow. The doctors told me I had a serious spinal injury. They couldn't say if I'd walk again. The words barely made sense. My mind refused to absorb them. My parents were there, their faces stricken. But it was the guy from the party who kept coming back, sitting beside my bed with red, puffy eyes. He kept whispering that he was sorry, that he had no idea what his friends had planned, that he hated them for what they did. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know what I felt. The friends who set me up on this date were in shock too. None of them had expected something like this. No one had. Now, my life is nothing but hospital beds and rehab sessions, trying to fight for a future that might never be the same. And those guys? The ones who thought it was all just a joke? They went home that night. They got to wake up the next morning and move on. I don't know if I ever will. The festival was exactly what I needed. Live music, a break from routine, and a chance to lose myself in the crowd. I had been waiting months to see some of these bands, and for the first few hours, nothing else mattered. The energy was insane, people singing along, the bass thumping so hard I could feel it in my chest. That's when she appeared, asking if I had any water. She had the same wristband as me, meaning she was here for all 3 days. Her voice was slightly hoarse from singing, and her smile was easy, familiar, like we'd met before. I handed her the bottle without thinking. She took a sip, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, and grinned. "Lifesaver," she said. We started talking between sets, and before I knew it, we were sitting on the grass, exchanging stories about past concerts, trading tips on the best way to navigate through the chaos. She had this effortless way of making conversation flow, like she'd known me for years. As the night stretched on, I suggested finding a cafe or somewhere quieter to sit for a while. She tilted her head, considering, then said, "I know a better place. Less crowded. You'll love it." I hesitated. We were near the festival grounds, where everything was packed with people, food trucks, and flashing lights. Leaving felt unnecessary, but she seemed so sure, so excited. I shrugged, figuring it wouldn't hurt to check it out. We slipped past the last security checkpoint and into the city streets. Neon signs buzzed above us, lighting the sidewalk in shifting shades of pink and blue. The air was humid, and the sounds of the festival faded behind us. She walked with easy confidence, leading me away from the main roads. At first, I didn't think much of it. I didn't know the area well, so I trusted she had a shortcut. But after a few turns, the streets grew quieter. the shops and bars replaced by shuttered buildings and flickering streetlights. The occasional car rumbled past, its headlights casting long shadows on the pavement. She kept saying, "It's just up ahead," or, "Trust me, it's worth it." Her voice was light, casual, like nothing about this was strange. But I started noticing little things. The way she glanced at her phone more often. The way her steps sped up just slightly when we passed under the dim glow of a street lamp. I finally asked, "Are we sure this is the right way?" She laughed, looking back at me. "What, you scared?" I forced a chuckle, not wanting to admit that, yeah, something about this felt off. "Just don't want to get lost." "We're not lost," she said, slipping her phone into her pocket. "We're almost there." The buildings here looked abandoned, windows boarded up, some covered in graffiti. The sidewalk had cracks, weeds pushing through the gaps. A single streetlight flickered at the next intersection, casting weak light on the empty road. She stopped there, pulling out her phone again, her face briefly lit by the glow of the screen. I glanced around. No other people, no open shops, just the distant hum of a car engine somewhere out of sight. She typed something quickly, then slid the phone away. "My friend's on her way," she said, giving me a small smile. I nodded, but the uneasy feeling in my gut didn't go away. As we walked, two guys appeared from a side street. They glanced at her, but it was quick, almost like they were pretending not to know her. Something about it felt off. Their body language, the way they kept walking without saying anything. It wasn't natural. I leaned in slightly and asked under my breath, "Who are they?" She barely looked at me. "Just some guys from around here," she said, brushing it off. I didn't believe her. The streets were nearly deserted now, and the festival noise felt like it belonged to another world. The glow of distant neon signs had faded, leaving only dim streetlights and shadows stretching across cracked pavement. Every now and then, she checked her phone, her pace quickening. Then, out of nowhere, she stopped and sighed. "Ugh, my phone died," she said, turning to me. "Can I use yours? Just a quick call. It's urgent." That was it. That was the moment I knew. Something about the way she asked. Too casual, too rehearsed. Every instinct told me to refuse, but at the same time, I didn't want to seem paranoid or rude. I hesitated, then handed her my phone. She took it without hesitation, her fingers moving too quickly over the screen. Before I could react, I saw movement from the corner of my eye. Those two guys. They stepped out from a narrow alleyway just ahead, blocking the path. They weren't in a rush. They weren't yelling. They just stood there waiting. My stomach dropped. She still had my phone. They were getting closer. I had walked straight into a trap. It was clear what was about to happen. They weren't just here to scare me. They were going to take everything I had, and she was part of it. She held onto my phone, looking between them and me, like she was just a bystander in all this. But she wasn't. She had led me here. One of the guys reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and metallic. A switchblade? A multi-tool? I didn't know, and I wasn't about to wait and find out. Fear paralyzed me for half a second, but survival instinct kicked in hard. I moved before they could. I shoved the closest guy with both hands, hard enough to knock him off balance. At the same time, I snatched my phone from her grip. She gasped, maybe in surprise, maybe in frustration. I didn't care. Then I ran. I didn't stop to think, didn't look back. I sprinted toward the nearest streetlight, toward anything that looked remotely safe. Behind me, I heard them shouting, their footsteps pounding against the pavement. They were chasing me. I pushed myself harder. Every muscle screamed, every breath burned, but I didn't slow down. If they caught me, I had no doubt how this would end. The hardest part was resisting the urge to turn around. Looking back would only slow me down. If I tripped, if I hesitated for even a second, I was done. All I could do was run. By some miracle, I reached a busier street. There were cars, real, moving cars. A taxi approached, its headlights flashing like salvation. I waved frantically, stepping right into the road. The driver slammed the brakes, cursing through the window, but I didn't care. I yanked the door open and jumped inside. "Go!" I gasped. "Just go." The driver hesitated for a split second, but something in my face must have convinced him. He hit the gas. I twisted in my seat, looking through the rear windshield. The three of them had stopped at the corner, just outside the glow of the streetlight. They weren't running anymore. They just stood there, watching. I didn't breathe properly until we had turned the corner, until their silhouettes disappeared from sight. Only then did I realize how much I was shaking. When I finally made it back to a busier part of the city, I blocked her number and deleted everything that connected me to her. Later, I found out from friends that this kind of thing happened often in that area. People would be lured away from crowds by someone friendly, someone disarming, and then, just like that, they'd be robbed, or worse. That night changed everything for me. I don't trust random invitations anymore, no matter how harmless they seem. It was supposed to be a fun night, maybe even the start of something good. Instead, it became the worst lesson I've ever learned. I hesitated for a long time before trying online dating, but a colleague convinced me, saying it was a modern way to meet someone. That's how he appeared in my life, a guy who seemed calm and charming. We had only been messaging for a week when he suggested going for an evening drive to the waterfront and having coffee with a view of the water. I hesitated, but his polite messages and friendly tone reassured me. At the agreed time, he pulled up outside my building in an old but well-maintained coupe, honking loudly. It actually seemed like a romantic gesture, like something from a movie. When I got into the car, I noticed the fresh scent of a recently used air freshener. The seats were clean, and everything inside looked tidy. As we drove down tree-lined streets, the city lights flickered through the branches. It was a peaceful, quiet ride, just as I had hoped. We started talking about our families, jobs, and hobbies, and I began to feel that I could trust him. He listened attentively, asked the right questions, and occasionally told jokes to make me laugh. He had an easy, confident way of speaking that put me at ease. When I suggested turning onto the main road toward the well-known waterfront, he told me he knew a better spot, less crowded, with a much nicer view of the water. It didn't seem strange to me. I thought it was a thoughtful gesture, like he wanted to make the evening special. We turned onto a dimly lit road lined with scattered houses, and soon, there were hardly any other cars around. The further we went, the quieter it became. After a while, I started to feel like we had been driving for too long. I glanced out the window, trying to recognize any landmarks, but everything looked unfamiliar. "How much farther is it?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Almost there," he said smoothly. "Don't worry." He brought the car to a full stop in a completely deserted area. There were no lights, no people, nothing but darkness stretching out in every direction. My stomach tightened. I turned to him, trying to keep my voice calm. "Why did we stop here?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached toward my bag, his fingers curling around the strap. "Give me all your money and valuables," he said, his voice low and firm. For a second, I couldn't process what he had just said. It was too sudden, too unreal. Then he ripped my phone from my hands and shoved it into his pocket. "Sit still and be quiet," he warned. "Unless you want trouble." My breath came in short, shallow bursts. I forced myself to think, to move. The door. I reached for the handle, but when I pulled, it wouldn't budge. Locked. Panic surged through me, but I didn't stop. I turned back to him, swung my arm, and struck his wrist as hard as I could. He cursed, jerking back just enough for me to lunge toward the door's lock. My fingers fumbled against the latch, but before I could pull it up, his hand clamped down on my shoulder. "Stop it," he snapped, shoving me back against the seat. I didn't stop. I twisted, grabbed the steering wheel, anything to keep myself from being pinned down. He tried to push me away, his grip tightening. We struggled, my nails scraping against the leather seats as I fought to break free. Then his elbow hit the gas pedal. The engine roared to life, and the car lurched forward. Neither of us had time to react. The headlights barely had time to catch the concrete barrier in front of us before the impact threw us forward. The sound was deafening. Metal crumpling, glass shattering, the airbag exploding against my face. A sharp, searing pain shot through my skull. And then, nothing. When I opened my eyes again, everything was a blur of blue flashing lights. My body felt heavy, my head throbbing so violently I thought I might black out again. Voices shouted around me, but they sounded distant, like they were coming from the other end of a tunnel. Hands pulled at me, carefully lifting me from the twisted wreckage of the car. The air was cold against my skin. Someone was talking to me, but I couldn't make out the words. Then, pain, sharp, deep, running through the entire left side of my head. I groaned, and the movement made everything spin. At the hospital, doctors ran tests, their voices hushed but urgent. The lights were too bright, stabbing into my already aching skull. I tried to focus on what they were saying, but only pieces reached me. Severe head trauma. Optic nerve damage. Uncertain if vision will fully return. I heard the words, but I couldn't absorb them. My world had been reduced to shadows and smudges. The edges of everything were blurred, like a fog I couldn't wipe away. The police came to take my statement. I struggled to piece everything together through the haze of pain and medication. They told me he had survived the crash, but he'd only broken his arm. They had enough evidence to charge him with attempted robbery and assault. It wasn't much of a comfort. I spent weeks in the hospital, trapped in a half-lit world. The doctors did what they could, but the damage was already done. My sight was never the same again. Family and friends visited, trying to cheer me up. But at night, when I was alone, the weight of it all crashed down on me. I had let him into my life. I had trusted him. And now, nothing would ever be the same. I couldn't walk through the city alone anymore. I had to learn new ways to navigate the world, relying on sounds, touch, and blurry outlines instead of clear details. Every step outside felt like a battle against an invisible force. The police gathered evidence, built a case. The only small comfort was knowing he wouldn't be able to hurt someone else so easily again. But the question never stopped running through my mind. What if I had just stayed home that night? I wanted adventure, something new, something different. Instead, I lost the life I knew. I met him on a classic cinema forum. He stood out right away. His knowledge of directors and screenwriting was deeper than anyone else's. His posts about rare black and white films were fascinating, and we started chatting in private messages. What intrigued me most was that he didn't just stick to old films. He also talked about modern cinema, especially dark psychological thrillers. When he invited me over for a rare film night, I felt a mix of excitement and curiosity. It seemed like a great opportunity to meet someone who truly shared my interests. Besides, a home movie night sounded cozy. I knew this was technically our first date, but he made sure to emphasize that it was nothing serious, just a casual evening with movies and pizza. I appreciated that. Still, I let my friend know where I was going, just in case. His apartment was in a tall, older building with long hallways lined with faded wallpaper. The place looked normal, nothing unusual. When he opened the door, he greeted me with a friendly smile and said everything was ready. Inside, the living room was simple but comfortable. A large screen TV faced the couch, and a fresh, steaming pizza sat on the coffee table. The atmosphere was relaxed. We talked a little about our favorite directors, and everything felt easy at first. Then, he put on a strange-looking DVD. From the opening minutes, the film was disturbingly violent. The scenes on the screen weren't just unsettling. They were outright revolting. It wasn't the kind of dark thriller I expected. I shifted uncomfortably, and finally asked if we could watch something else. He just smirked. This isn't even the worst part. When the scenes became unbearable, I told him to turn it off and tried to stand up. His expression changed. His friendly demeanor was gone. Now, he was serious. Too serious. He said he had chosen this movie on purpose to test my endurance. I suddenly felt like an experiment, like he was watching my reactions for some kind of twisted reason. I told him I didn't like it and headed toward the door. He stepped in front of me. "Relax," he said. "Just watch till the end." My stomach tightened. His eyes had a strange gleam, a kind of excitement that wasn't right. He wasn't just disappointed I wanted to leave. He was fixated on keeping me there. I forced myself to stay calm. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. He just smiled slightly. "I want to see if you can be part of my special world." I acted like I wanted to negotiate. I told him I'd stay and talk, but only if he turned the movie off. He hesitated, then hit pause. His eyes stayed locked on me, calculating. When he shifted slightly to the side, I moved. Fast. I lunged toward the front door. His hand clamped around my wrist, his grip tightening. "You're not leaving," he said through clenched teeth. I didn't think, I just screamed. I yelled as loud as I could, pounding on the wall. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Someone was out there. His grip faltered. For a split second, he was caught off guard. That was all I needed. I wrenched free, fumbled with the lock, and yanked the door open. A woman stood in the hallway, probably a neighbor. Her face registered shock as I bolted past her, not stopping to explain. I ran down the stairs, skipping steps, nearly tripping, my breath ragged. The moment I hit the street, I felt my whole body shaking. I spotted a taxi rolling by and flagged it down, jumping inside before he could follow. As soon as I got home, I blocked him on everything. Then I went to the forum. I warned the other women. I wrote a post detailing what had happened. And then, the most chilling part, another girl replied. She had met him too. He had shown her a special film as well. But with her, things hadn't escalated as much. I realized just how close I had come to real danger. If that neighbor hadn't been there. That night I learned a hard lesson. Just because someone shares your interests doesn't mean they're safe. And never, ever go to a stranger's home without a guaranteed way out. I met her online, bonding over our shared love for hiking and nature. She wrote about her passion for nighttime walks by the water and how she could set up unforgettable picnics with a guitar and lanterns. That caught my attention. I had been wanting to escape the city for a while, to see the stars without the glow of streetlights ruining the view. She suggested we meet out there, on a deserted stretch of the coast, to avoid crowds. I thought it was a great idea for a first date, just us, surrounded by nature. That evening, I got into my car and headed out of the city, following the directions she had given me. The further I drove, the fewer streetlights there were, and eventually, the road became a narrow dirt path cutting through dense trees. My GPS signal flickered in and out, but she had described the route clearly enough that I wasn't too worried. Still, a small thought nagged at me. Why had she insisted I not tell anyone where I was going? She had laughed it off, saying it would be our little secret, something special between just the two of us. It felt playful at the time, but now, with the road stretching on in complete darkness, it seemed a little odd. When I finally arrived, the place was almost completely silent except for the distant sound of waves. The moonlight reflected off the water, casting a pale glow over the empty shore. There were only a couple of cars parked nearby, but I didn't see her at first. Then, from the shadows, a small group emerged. 3 people, one of them her. She smiled, walking up to me. "Hey, I hope you don't mind. I brought some friends. They wanted to tag along and keep me company." I hesitated. It wasn't what I expected, but I tried not to overthink it. Maybe she just felt safer not meeting a stranger alone. The other 2, a guy and a girl, stood a few feet back, watching me. The guy was taller than me, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark hoodie with the hood up. The girl had long hair and kept her arms crossed, shifting her weight from foot to foot like she was impatient about something. "Yeah, of course," I said, forcing a smile. They had already set up a blanket on the sand, a small speaker playing quiet music. A plastic bag with snacks sat nearby. It all looked casual enough. I sat down, trying to shake off the slight discomfort creeping in. "Here, have a drink," she said, handing me a plastic bottle. It was one of those unmarked ones, the kind people use when they pour something from a bigger container. I took a careful sip. The taste hit immediately. Cheap alcohol, strong and sharp. I coughed lightly, forcing myself to swallow. Her 2 friends had started whispering to each other, occasionally glancing at me. The atmosphere started to shift. One of the guys, the one in the hoodie, began telling strange stories about people disappearing without a trace in places like this. He spoke in a slow, deliberate tone, watching my reaction. The other guy smirked and made comments about my car, asking if I had anything valuable inside. I forced a chuckle, trying to keep things light, but my stomach tightened. The girl with them seemed to sense the tension and tried to keep the mood relaxed, laughing at their comments and offering more drinks. But the way they kept insisting, pushing the bottle towards me, made me uneasy. I glanced at the ocean. The waves crashed against the shore, steady and indifferent. There was no one else around. No other voices, no distant headlights. Just us. A thought hit me. They wanted me drunk. And then what? I kept my expression neutral, pretending to go along with it, but my mind was racing. This felt off. The way they whispered, the way they watched me. My instincts screamed at me to leave. I needed a reason to get up, something that wouldn't make them suspicious. I patted my pockets. "Damn, I think I left my phone in my car," I said, standing up. The guy in the hoodie immediately got up too. "I'll help you find it," he said too quickly. I forced a laugh. "Nah, it's fine. I probably dropped it on the seat." He didn't take the hint. He followed me as I walked toward my car. My heart was pounding, but I kept my pace casual. I slid my hand into my pocket, gripping my keys, my thumb pressing against the button to unlock the doors. As soon as I reached the car, I yanked the door open and jumped inside. The engine roared to life. "Hey!" the guy shouted, lunging forward. I slammed the door shut and threw the car into reverse, kicking up a cloud of sand. He staggered back, waving his arms, yelling something I didn't bother to hear. I shifted into drive and sped off, my tires spinning against the loose gravel before gaining traction. In the rearview mirror, I saw the girl standing still, her face unreadable. The other guy looked furious, his hands clenched into fists. But I didn't stop to think about what they were planning. I just drove, pushing the speed limit until I saw the first streetlight in the distance. Later, a friend of mine who worked in law enforcement told me that there had been several cases in that area of drunk guys getting robbed, left stranded without their phones or wallets. Some even had their cars stolen when they passed out. I thought back to that night. The way she had suggested that specific isolated spot. The way they had insisted I drink more. Maybe she had been part of it from the start. Maybe she felt guilty at the last second. I don't know. What I do know is that I was stupid to trust someone I had just met online. To go somewhere that remote with no one knowing where I was. I got lucky. That night changed me. Now, I only meet new people in busy places. And I always have a way out. We met in an online community where people shared recipes and cooking tips. He posted a lot about his experiments with unusual dishes, saying he cooked everything himself and loved trying new things. I was curious and started chatting with him. Over the next couple of weeks, we talked regularly, mostly about food, but also about everyday things. Eventually, he invited me for coffee at a small place that was known for its homemade pies. He said I'd love the atmosphere. I agreed, thinking it wouldn't hurt to meet in a public place. After work, I arrived at the cafe and spotted him right away. Tall, wearing a coat and polished shoes, looking well put together. He waved and smiled, and I felt a little more at ease. The cafe was cozy, with dim lighting and the smell of cinnamon and baked apples in the air. We got a table by the window, where I could see the parked cars and people walking by. At first, everything was normal. He was talkative, telling funny stories about his cooking fails and strange ingredient combinations he'd tried. It was easy to listen to him. He had a way of making small things sound interesting, and I caught myself thinking that maybe this could turn into something real. He seemed intelligent, polite, and genuinely passionate about cooking. We ordered cappuccinos and a slice of their signature apple pie to share. I told him, almost as a joke, that I rarely gave online dating a chance. He smiled and said he understood why. It was hard to know if people were who they claimed to be. He asked about my job, my family, what I liked to do in my free time. His questions were detailed, like he wanted to get a full picture of me. I didn't mind at first. After all, that's how you get to know someone. But the way he listened so intently, his eyes fixed on me, made me a little uneasy. When I tried to steer the conversation towards something lighter, movies, travel, anything, he kept bringing it back to personal topics. He wanted to know about my past relationships, why they ended, and why I wasn't seeing anyone now. It felt a bit invasive, but he asked so politely that I didn't want to seem rude by refusing to answer. I told him I just hadn't met the right person yet. He nodded but kept pressing, asking what qualities I looked for, if I ever regretted ending any of my relationships, if I missed being with someone. Something about the way he was so invested in my answers made me uncomfortable. It wasn't anything obvious. He wasn't being aggressive or inappropriate. But I felt like he was too focused, too eager to know everything. The feeling that he was getting too involved, too quickly, was growing. As we stepped out of the cafe, he casually suggested meeting again. He had a whole plan already. Places we could go next week, things we could try together. It was oddly specific for a first meeting. I hesitated. Something about the evening had left me uneasy, and I wasn't ready to commit to another date. I smiled and said something vague about needing time to think. His expression changed instantly. It was like I had insulted him. His eyes narrowed, his lips pressed into a tight line. Then, in a voice that had lost its warmth, he asked, "So, you didn't like me?" I felt a small rush of panic, but kept my tone calm. "It's not that. I just don't want to rush into anything." His jaw clenched. "You're wasting my time." His voice was still quiet, but there was something sharp in it. "If I were in your place, I'd know what I wanted by now." I forced a polite goodbye and turned toward my car, deciding not to say anything more. It didn't feel safe to argue. As I walked, I had the distinct feeling that he was following me. Outside, the cold air hit me, but it did nothing to clear the tension building in my chest. I quickened my pace, trying to shake the creeping fear that he was still behind me. But then I heard his voice, low, muttering, getting closer. I turned my head slightly, just enough to catch his expression in the dim streetlights. His face was twisted in something like anger or frustration. And then, loud enough for me to hear clearly, he said, "Nobody treats me like this. If you agreed to meet, you should follow through." My stomach dropped. This wasn't just disappointment or bruised ego. It was anger, real and dangerous. I reached my car and yanked the door open, sliding inside as fast as I could. My hands were shaking, but I managed to hit the lock button just before he reached me. He slammed his hand against the window, making me flinch. His face was inches from the glass, twisted with fury. "You're just another arrogant girl," he spat. "You'll regret this." I turned the key so fast I nearly dropped it. The engine roared to life and I threw the car into reverse, not caring if I hit anything. He stepped back just enough for me to pull away, and I sped off, barely able to breathe. By the time I got home, my phone was buzzing. Several messages from him. At first, they were just insults, telling me I was stuck up, that I thought too highly of myself. Then they got worse. Threats, accusations. He blamed me for leading him on. He told me he wouldn't let it go. I stared at the screen, feeling sick. I blocked his number, but even that didn't make me feel safe. I had never been in a situation like this before. It had started as a normal date. How had it turned into this? The next day, he found a new way to reach me. New numbers, new accounts. The messages kept coming, more aggressive than before. He said he knew where I lived, that I shouldn't ignore him, that he would make sure I learned a lesson. I had never felt fear like this. Every time I stepped outside, I scanned the street, expecting to see him. At work, I kept checking over my shoulder. My heart pounded every time I heard footsteps behind me. I reached out to a friend who worked in law enforcement. He told me to save everything, every message, every call. He said I should be careful, watch for anything unusual. But the worst part was realizing he really had found me. One evening, I got a message with a photo attached. My apartment building, taken from outside. I felt the blood drain from my face. He wasn't just angry. He wasn't just sending threats. He was here, watching. That night, I went straight to the police and filed a report for harassment and stalking. They took it seriously, told me they would investigate. But even knowing that, I didn't feel safe. He had already found me once. The messages didn't stop right away, but after a few days, they slowed. Maybe he knew I had gone to the police. Maybe they had already spoken to him. Eventually, they stopped completely. But the fear didn't. For months, I double-checked every lock, avoided walking alone at night, and flinched whenever my phone buzzed. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see him. It took a long time to feel normal again. I never would have guessed that one simple date could lead to something like this. But it taught me a lesson I won't forget. Always trust your instincts, and don't ignore the warning signs. We met through a popular city chat where people often gathered to share unusual experiences. He seemed like a lively guy, said he worked in event planning, and knew how to bring excitement into people's lives. When he suggested meeting at a small cafe on the outskirts of the city, I thought it would be a fun, light-hearted date. The evening was warm, and the cafe was nearly empty, except for a couple of customers sitting at nearby tables. We ordered glasses of lemonade and some snacks, chatting about various events happening in the city. Everything was going smoothly. He joked around, showed me small magic tricks with coins, as if trying to prove he was a master of surprises. I liked his carefree attitude and felt happy that I had finally met someone interesting to talk to. At one point, he said he had prepared a special fiery joke, something that usually provoked a storm of emotions from the audience. I assumed he was talking about some harmless trick with paper or a lighter, but then he suddenly pulled a small bottle and some napkins from his bag. My heart skipped a beat, but before I could ask anything, he poured some liquid onto a napkin and set it on fire, holding it at arm's length. The flame flared up brightly, looking impressive for a few seconds, just like in internet stunt videos. But then, unexpectedly, the fire spread to the tablecloth, and the flames eagerly caught onto the napkins lying nearby. I gasped in shock, and he tried to put it out quickly with his hand, only making things worse. The cafe was small, and the fire could spread fast. I jumped back from the table, but he panicked and threw water from his glass onto the burning tablecloth. To my horror, the liquid must have had alcohol in it, or maybe the bottle itself was flammable, because the fire flared up even stronger. I felt the heat burn my hands and face. The flames licked up the table, reaching toward me, and I stumbled backward, knocking over my chair. The smell of burning cloth and something chemical filled the air. A second later, waiters rushed over with a fire extinguisher, but everything happened so fast that I barely had time to react. I squeezed my eyes shut as pain shot through my skin, my mind struggling to catch up with what had just happened. People were yelling, some scrambling away, others shouting for help. Someone had already called an ambulance. My head spun from the mix of smoke, heat, and panic, and all I could think was that this was supposed to be just a simple date. They rushed me to the hospital, and the first examination showed that I had serious burns on my hands and face. The pain was unbearable, sharp and constant, and my mind slipped into a state where everything felt distant, muffled. Nurses moved around me quickly, treating my injuries, applying cooling gels, wrapping my hands in bandages. Hours later, he showed up. He was crying, apologizing over and over, swearing that he never meant for this to happen. It was just a prank, he kept saying. But the doctor didn't let him stay long, asking him to leave as soon as he saw my condition. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I had been so naive. How had I not realized how reckless he was? How had I not seen the danger? The days passed, and I slowly started to understand that my life had changed permanently. My hands were wrapped in thick bandages. My face felt raw. Some of my hair had been burned. The doctors couldn't promise me that the scars would ever fully heal. That night changed everything. My appearance, my confidence, my trust in people who played carelessly with dangerous things. I filed a report against him, but there was no proof of malicious intent. They classified it as an accident. He walked away without real consequences, while I was left with a sentence of my own. Daily treatments, constant pain, and the weight of knowing that my face would never look the same again. That date, which was supposed to be fun and lighthearted, had become my worst nightmare. But what haunted me most wasn't just the scars. It was the thought that I could have stopped it. That if I had recognized the danger earlier, spoken up, left before things escalated, none of this would have happened. Now, every time I look in the mirror, I see someone I have to learn to accept all over again. And I understand, more than ever, that trust isn't something you give freely. It's something that has to be earned. At a party, I met a girl who seemed sweet and a little shy. We talked for a while, and she invited me over to her place, mentioning that she had just moved into her first apartment on her own. It was in an older neighborhood with brick buildings, and she promised to surprise me with her cooking skills. It sounded nice, low-key, casual, so I agreed. Later that evening, I made my way to her place. The building was old, and when I reached her floor, I noticed the hallway was in rough shape. The walls were scuffed, the paint peeling in places, and the single light overhead flickered erratically. The door to her apartment looked just as worn, faded paint, a dent near the handle. But I reminded myself not to judge. Maybe inside, it was completely different. She answered quickly when I knocked, smiling as she stepped aside to let me in. She was barefoot, wearing an oversized sweater that made her seem smaller than she was at the party. "Come in, just take off your shoes," she said, already walking toward the kitchen. Her voice was light, casual, like she'd done this 100 times before. I stepped inside and hesitated for a second. The air felt stale, carrying the faint smell of damp wood and something else, something I couldn't quite place. The walls were mostly bare, except for a few boxes stacked near the entrance. The floor creaked under my weight as I walked in, my socks picking up a thin layer of dust. She disappeared into the kitchen, and I heard the clatter of dishes as she moved around. I took a few more steps and looked around the living room. The place was a mess. Not in a just moved in kind of way, but like it hadn't been properly lived in for a long time. There were trash bags piled in one corner, some ripped open with crumpled papers spilling out. A broken chair leaned against the wall. The coffee table was pushed to the side, covered in unopened mail and empty bottles. "Sorry about the mess," she called from the kitchen. "I've only been here a couple of weeks, and I haven't really had time to unpack." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. Something felt off, but I didn't want to be rude. "No worries," I said, forcing a chuckle. "Moving is always a nightmare." I was about to sit down on the couch when I heard something from the other side of the wall. Heavy footsteps, then a dull thud. It was loud, like something being dragged. Then silence. The wall was thin, and I figured it was just a neighbor moving furniture or something. I tried to ignore it, but a few seconds later, there was another noise. A sharp tapping sound, rhythmic, like someone knocking on a table or a door. Then another thud. Before I could think too much about it, she called me to the kitchen. The kitchen was small and dimly lit, the yellowish light above the stove casting shadows on the walls. A pot was boiling on the stovetop, steam rising up in thick clouds. The table was set, but I noticed something strange. There was only one plate, one fork. She must have seen me looking because she smiled. "The rest of my stuff is still packed away. I only found one set so far," she said, brushing it off like it wasn't a big deal. I nodded slowly, glancing at the pot on the stove. The smell was strong, some kind of broth, but there was an odd scent mixed in, something almost metallic. I didn't ask. Instead, I just sat down, listening to the muffled sounds from the other side of the wall. We started eating, and she told me that she had recently moved from another part of the city after splitting with her old roommates. She mentioned that there had been constant conflicts in her previous apartment, arguments over cleaning, noise, and just general drama. She said she wanted a fresh start, a place of her own where she didn't have to deal with anyone else's problems. I nodded, trying to keep the conversation light. I asked about her studies, her friends, just normal things, but I could tell she was tense. She answered in short sentences, her eyes flickering toward the hallway every now and then, like she was expecting something. Then, Out of nowhere, someone pounded on the door. Not just a knock, a heavy, forceful banging that made the thin walls shudder. She went pale. She went. Her grip tightened on her spoon, and she barely whispered, "It's probably my neighbor." I raised an eyebrow. Should we just ignore it? She swallowed hard, her hands now pressed flat on the table. "I had a run-in with him already," she muttered. "He's been pissed at me over some stupid things. Music, plumbing noises. He doesn't like new people." The pounding came again, louder. A man's voice boomed from the other side, slurring his words slightly but still clear enough to be threatening. "Open the damn door! I know you're in there!" I glanced at her. "Are you sure we shouldn't—" "No!" she snapped, then lowered her voice. "Please, just don't." The way she said it sent a chill down my spine. The situation was turning bad, fast. I stood up and moved toward the hallway. The door rattled as another heavy fist landed against it, shaking in its frame. She stayed seated, frozen in place. She looked at me, her eyes wide. "Don't open it," she whispered. The banging continued. He was furious, shouting something about her car, about her making noise at night. He was clearly drunk or just beyond reasoning. I exhaled slowly. "We need to call the cops." She bit her lip. "My phone's in my room," she whispered. "And your jacket?" I turned my head toward the coat rack where my phone was tucked inside my pocket. The problem was, it was right by the front door. I moved as quietly as possible, my heart pounding, and reached for it. I pulled out my phone, but when I glanced at the screen, my stomach sank. Almost no signal. A single bar flickered on and off. The doorframe groaned as another impact struck it. The hinges creaked. He was hitting it harder now, like he was testing how much more it could take before breaking. "Come on," I muttered to myself, watching my phone struggle to load anything. Emergency call. Nothing. No connection. She was staring at me now, her breath shallow. "He's crazy," she whispered. "He's been watching me since I moved in." First, it was complaints. Then he started standing in the hallway, just staring at my door. One time, I came home and found footprints right outside, like he'd been standing there for hours. The sound of splintering wood snapped me out of it. I clenched my jaw. "We can't stay here." I looked around. There had to be another way out. I walked back toward the kitchen, scanning the walls. Then I saw it. An old, narrow door near the stove, leading to what looked like a back stairwell. "This," I said, pointing. "Where does this go?" She hesitated. "It's the emergency exit, but it's old, and I don't—" Another crash at the door. The top hinge had partially ripped out of the wood. I grabbed the handle and yanked the door open. A rusted metal staircase spiraled down into the darkness below. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than staying here. "Come on," I said, stepping onto the first creaky step. She took a small step forward but stopped. I can't." "What?" She shook her head. "I just moved in. I can't just run away. This is my home now." I stared at her. "Are you serious?" Another loud crash. The lock was barely holding. I exhaled sharply. "Look, do what you want, but I'm leaving." She hesitated for a second longer, then nodded quickly. "I'll be okay. I'll call the police when I can." I didn't waste another second. I turned and started down the staircase, gripping the railing as the metal groaned under my weight. Behind me, I heard a sharp cracking sound, like wood finally giving in. Then something heavy hit the floor. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I just kept going, moving as fast as I could down the steps. When I reached the bottom, I burst out into the night air, breathing hard. Somewhere above me there was a muffled noise, something falling, maybe furniture. Then silence. I ran out onto the street, my hands shaking as I finally managed to get a signal and called a cab. I didn't know what happened after I left. I never saw her again, never heard any news about what went down that night. I didn't check. I didn't want to. I just know that since then, I've made one rule for myself. Never go to someone's place unless I really, really know them. Especially if they have problems with a neighbor who doesn't seem right. I never learned how to swim, but I always wanted to. So when a guy from the sports complex invited me to a country club with a pool for the weekend, I thought it was the perfect chance. He assured me there were instructors there, and if I got scared, he'd be right by my side. We planned to meet at the main entrance, which led to a beautiful courtyard. The outdoor pool was huge, surrounded by lounge chairs and greenery. The whole place looked like something from a vacation ad. The water was so clear and blue that I felt a little rush of excitement. Maybe I would actually enjoy this date. He seemed calm and confident, while I stood there soaking in the atmosphere. I could hear splashes and laughter from people already in the pool. Some were swimming laps, others were just floating around or sunbathing nearby. Everything about the place seemed inviting. I could already picture myself standing in the shallow part, getting used to the water, maybe even attempting to move a little. We changed into our swimsuits and walked toward the pool. The sun was warm, and I could feel the smooth tiles under my feet as we got closer. People were scattered around, some chatting on lounge chairs, some wading in the water. I told him straight up, I could only go in up to my waist because I was afraid of deep water. He smirked. You'll never really learn how to swim that way. We sat on the edge of the pool, letting our legs dangle in. The water was cool, but it felt nice. I started to relax a little, thinking that maybe I could at least splash around for a bit. Then he said something about shock therapy being a common trick for beginners. Before I could even process what he meant, he grabbed me and shoved me into the deep end. Water closed over my head instantly. My arms flailed. My legs kicked uselessly. I couldn't find the bottom, couldn't find anything solid to grab onto. Panic set in as I struggled to breathe, water rushing into my nose and mouth. I thrashed wildly, trying to break through the surface, but I couldn't tell which way was up. My chest burned as I gasped for air and got nothing but water. Panic took over completely. I couldn't think, couldn't figure out how to move. Somewhere above, I heard shouting. Someone yelled, "What the hell are you doing?" But I had no idea what was happening up there. Did he think I would just pop up, laughing and splashing? That I'd instinctively figure it out? The pressure in my lungs was unbearable. I was swallowing water, choking, sinking. My vision blurred at the edges. Then hands grabbed me, strong arms pulling me up. I broke through the surface, coughing violently, my body shaking. Someone dragged me to the edge of the pool and lifted me out. I collapsed on the tiles, gasping for air, my chest heaving. My entire body felt weak, my throat raw. My limbs wouldn't stop trembling. I barely registered the voices around me, panicked, angry, shocked. A staff member knelt beside me, checking if I was responsive. I could hear him speaking, but it took a second to understand. "You're okay. Just breathe." I couldn't answer. My throat felt shredded. Then I saw him. He was standing a few feet away, pale, eyes wide with shock. He kept mumbling, "I didn't mean... I thought it was a joke. I didn't think..." A joke. Someone was yelling at him, but I wasn't sure who. My head was pounding. My whole body felt like it had been ripped apart from the inside. I just sat there, staring at the ground, unable to say a word. The staff called an ambulance. My lungs were in bad shape from all the water I swallowed. At the hospital, everything felt like a blur. The first 24 hours were the worst. I couldn't stop coughing. Every breath felt like I was being stabbed from the inside. The doctors said I had serious inflammation and might have long-term damage. He showed up with flowers. I couldn't even look at him. I didn't yell. I didn't say anything. I just cried, replaying those seconds underwater, the moment I realized I couldn't save myself. He sat there, trying to explain. I wanted to help you get over your fear. I didn't mean for this to happen. My family barely held back their anger. My mother clenched her fists so hard her knuckles went white. My father refused to even look at him. I spent days in recovery, struggling to breathe, unable to move much. The reality of what happened settled in slowly. I could have died. When they finally discharged me, I realized something. I was terrified of water now. Even thinking about a swimming pool made my hands shake. The doctors prescribed long-term rehabilitation, breathing exercises, physical therapy, a long road to recovery, physically and mentally. He left town, moved away, maybe out of guilt, maybe just to escape the consequences of what he did. He never found the right words to apologize. Maybe there weren't any. I was left alone with my fear, my damaged lungs, and the memory of sinking. What was supposed to be a perfect first date turned into a nightmare I would carry with me forever. And now, I know. There's no excuse for putting someone's life at risk. No shock method is worth it. If someone dismisses your fears, if they don't care enough to respect them, they don't deserve to be anywhere near you. We met at a hiking club where people shared stories about interesting trails and camping spots. He seemed calm and reasonable, talking about how he often went on solo trips. When he invited me for a weekend camping trip with an overnight stay, I hesitated. It was our first real date, but he described it so romantically. A campfire, a sky full of stars, the rustling of trees. I agreed. We drove out on a dirt road deep into the forest, far from any cell service. It felt like a small adventure, and I trusted him as an experienced camper. The trees grew denser as we drove, the road narrowing. Eventually, we reached a clearing where he parked the car. The air smelled fresh, damp with the scent of pine. He helped set up the tent, working quickly, securing the stakes without hesitation. The fire crackled as he cooked a simple meal over the open flame. Canned beans, bread, some grilled sausage. It wasn't much, but after the long drive, it tasted good. The sun dipped below the trees, and the world became quiet. Just the occasional rustle of leaves or distant call of an owl. Sitting by the fire, we talked about life, about past travels. He seemed friendly, though his comments were sometimes oddly sharp. He mentioned how most people didn't understand the real beauty of solitude, how they were weak, always relying on others. His tone was matter-of-fact, not angry, so I brushed it off. The night fell fast, shadows stretching long across the ground. The fire burned lower, its warmth fading. It was getting cold. We climbed into the tent, zipping it shut against the damp air. At first, he continued talking. Stories from past hikes, nights spent alone in the wilderness. His voice was steady, but something about it changed. His words slowed, became more deliberate. Then, out of nowhere, he said he wasn't sure about me, that I didn't appreciate his effort or understand how special he was. I didn't know what to say. I told him, of course, I was grateful for everything. The drive, the setup, the fire. I thought maybe he was joking, just testing me. But his voice had changed. It was lower now, almost flat. Suddenly, he grabbed my wrist and yanked me toward him, his grip rough, his expression unreadable in the dim light. His voice was tight with anger as he accused me of faking my interest, of pretending to enjoy being here with him. I froze, my heart hammering. I tried to pull away, but he was stronger. His fingers dug into my skin as he told me I wasn't leaving until I proved I truly wanted to be with him. The words sent a chill through me. We were alone, deep in the forest, no signal, no way to call for help. I swallowed my fear, my voice shaking as I told him he was wrong, that I was grateful, that I wanted to be here. But he wasn't listening. His grip tightened. The flickering light from the dying fire cast shifting shadows on the tent walls, making everything feel smaller, like the walls were closing in. Outside, the forest was still. No wind, no night animals rustling in the underbrush. Just silence, pressing in like a weight. I knew I was trapped. My breath came fast, but I forced myself to stay calm. If I panicked now, it would only make things worse. I had to think. He kept talking, his voice low and harsh, saying things I didn't fully understand. About how people always left him. About how he wouldn't let that happen again. I had to find a way out before his anger turned into something worse. I forced myself to nod, to agree with whatever he was saying. Anything to keep him from snapping completely. I needed an opening. Then, after what felt like forever, he finally released me. His eyes stayed on me, searching for something, waiting. He didn't trust me, not fully, but he thought he had control. I had to make him believe it. The moment came when he turned to check the fire outside. His movements were sharp, agitated. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my bag, shoved the tent flap open, and ran. The night swallowed me whole. The forest was a wall of black, the trees stretching up like massive shadows. The ground was uneven, roots and rocks hidden beneath the thick leaves. My breath came in ragged gasps as I ran blindly, my only thought to put as much distance between us as possible. Behind me, I heard him yell. Then, the sound of heavy footsteps pounding after me. Panic surged through me. I pushed harder, my legs burning, my lungs screaming for air. But the darkness was impossible. I stumbled, my foot catching on something, and suddenly I was falling. The impact was brutal. I hit the ground hard, my side slamming against something sharp and unyielding. Pain exploded in my back, a deep, searing agony that stole my breath. I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, but I bit down on it, forcing myself silent. Somewhere above, he was still looking for me. His voice cut through the night, furious, telling me this was my fault, that I made him do this. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I stayed pressed against the cold, uneven ground, hidden in the shadows behind a large rock. I could hear his footsteps crunching through the underbrush, circling, hunting. Then, finally, silence. I didn't know how long I lay there. Minutes. Hours. The pain in my back was unbearable, but the fear kept me still. At some point, exhaustion took over, and everything blurred. When I opened my eyes again, the sky was lighter. The black of night had turned to the deep blue of early morning. I wasn't sure how I was still conscious, but I knew I had to move. It took everything I had to drag myself forward, inch by inch, toward where I hoped the road was. My body screamed in protest. My hands clawed at the dirt, pulling me forward when my legs refused to work. The sound of an engine cut through the silence. I forced my head up, blinking through the haze of pain and exhaustion. A truck. With the last of my strength, I raised a shaking hand. The truck slowed. A man climbed out, his face blurry, his voice distant as he spoke to me. Then, nothing. When I woke up again, I was in a hospital. The white walls, the beeping machines, the sterile smell, it all felt unreal. Then the doctor told me my spine was damaged, severely. I wouldn't walk again. The words didn't sink in at first. They felt distant, like they were meant for someone else. Later, when I could talk, I told the police what happened. I told them where to find him. But he was gone. The tent, the fire, any trace of him, gone. I think about that night all the time, about how I ignored the warning signs, how I trusted too easily. What was supposed to be a simple camping trip turned into the worst night of my life. Now everything is different. I have to relearn how to live, how to move, how to exist in a body that no longer works the way it should. And he's still out there, somewhere. I don't know if they'll ever find him. I had never tried a hot air balloon ride before, but I had secretly dreamed about it for years. When a new acquaintance casually mentioned that her distant relative worked with aerostats, I immediately jumped on the idea of arranging a romantic date in the sky. She was thrilled by my boldness and agreed right away, saying it would definitely be an unforgettable moment. Inside, I was tense with excitement. We had agreed to fly early in the morning to catch the sunrise. The thought of it made my chest tighten, a mix of anticipation and nerves. When we arrived at the launch site, the basket and balloon were already set up. The pilot, an older man who looked experienced, was inspecting the equipment. He nodded at us as we approached. The burner roared to life, sending bursts of flame into the envelope above us. The pre-dawn darkness flickered orange and yellow as the balloon began to inflate fully. The air smelled faintly of propane. We climbed into the basket, and the pilot made a few final checks, pulling on ropes and adjusting the burner. Then, with a gentle lift, we began to rise. The ground slowly pulled away beneath us. First, the launch site, then the trees, then the roads and buildings started shrinking. The city lights flickered below, some still glowing against the fading night. A light wind carried us forward. The sky shifted from deep blue to soft pink as the sun neared the horizon. She laughed, pointing at the sky, her face glowing in the dim morning light. Below us, tiny cars moved along distant roads. She gripped the edge of the basket, taking in everything with wide eyes. The pilot spoke in a calm, practiced voice. He said this wasn't his first flight that morning. He'd already been up twice, returning each time to swap out gas tanks. He sounded proud, like this was just another routine day for him. I was thinking about asking her to meet again, to plan something just as special next time. She looked so happy, the kind of happiness that felt contagious. The warmth of the rising sun mixed with the heat from the burner. We took selfies, capturing the glow on our faces and the vast, beautiful sky around us. It felt perfect. No one suspected anything was wrong. About half an hour into the flight, the pilot's expression changed. His hands moved frantically over the control panel, adjusting the burner. His lips moved as he muttered something under his breath. He checked the gas pressure again, his fingers gripping the valves tighter than before. "There's something wrong with the airflow," he finally said, more to himself than to us. I felt it then, a slow, steady drop. It wasn't dramatic at first, just enough to notice. The balloon was sinking. She grabbed my arm. "What's happening?" Her voice was tight. I had no answer. The pilot suddenly threw a sandbag over the side, then another. The basket jolted slightly upward, but it didn't last. We were still descending. The treetops below were getting closer, branches swaying in the wind. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. The pilot cursed under his breath. He turned back to us and yelled, "Hold on! Hard landing ahead!" A sudden gust of wind pushed the balloon sideways. The trees rushed up at us. The pilot yanked on the ropes, trying to stabilize, but it was too late. The basket scraped against the upper branches, jerking violently. The impact spun us around. Leaves and branches whipped past, scratching at our skin. The balloon tilted sharply, throwing weight to one side. The ropes groaned under the strain. Then, a snap. The basket lurched. One of the cables had broken. The structure twisted, slamming us hard against the wooden edge. My stomach flipped as we pitched sideways. She screamed. The sound of it cut through the chaos. Then came the real drop. We hit the ground with brutal force. My body crumpled under the impact. Pain shot through me like fire, radiating from my back and limbs. The world spun, everything blurred. For a moment, I heard only silence. Then, a heavy crash. The balloon collapsed somewhere behind us. I tried to move, but my body refused. My head pounded, darkness creeping into my vision. The last thing I heard was her voice. One final piercing scream before everything went black. I woke up to a bright, sterile light and the distant beeping of machines. My body ached in ways I couldn't describe. Then, the realization hit me. I couldn't see. A voice spoke, but it felt far away. "You suffered a traumatic brain injury," someone said. "Your optic nerves were severely damaged." I barely processed the words. My mind was still in the air, still falling, still hearing her scream. Then, the second blow came. She didn't survive, they told me. She died on impact. I lay there, silent. The weight of those words settled into my chest, pressing down like something I couldn't push away. I tried to remember the last thing I saw. Her smile, the sunrise, the sky stretching endlessly before us. The pilot survived. He had multiple fractures, internal injuries, but he lived. They said he might not walk again. But me? I was left in the dark. There was no fixing it. No going back. The idea had been mine. That perfect morning had been my plan. And now, she was gone. Now, I wake up every day to nothing but blackness, replaying her laughter in my head, trying to hold on to the image of the open sky, one I will never see again.